Our first footnote is Hank patting himself on the back for being so funny. Oh boy.
What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that behold. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken to sell us secure, we're worthy as we are.
Hello cult members, loyal subscribers, and casual viewers alike. I know that we really enjoyed that Frank and Geisler book, so I thought let's read another one. Now I know the other book was really convincing, we're all Christians now, so let's go ahead and tackle evolution. In all seriousness, this was a really big deal in my Christian walk. I thought this really had all the answers regarding evolution. I don't remember if Hank Hanegraaff was some kind of radio host or if he was just on a lot of radio shows as a guest. I don't remember. I just remember I really liked him, and I heard this advertisement for this book a few times. And I thought the next time this comes on the radio, I'm gonna have to pull my car over and write it down because I need to order this book. And so I did. You know, I frantically looked for a pen, wrote down the 1-800 number, called, received the book, and I was just enamored with it, quite frankly. It gave me so much against evolution that I thought really helped me with Christianity. Honestly, evolution isn't really a nail in the coffin when it comes to creationism, so I'm not really sure why this was such a big deal in our church. I'm not sure why I was trained to hate it so much, but I can say that most of my evolution learning came from the pulpit, not from biology class, not from any other source that would be a reputable source for evolution, but it was the pulpit, and it was books like this. I remember reading this book and being so excited about it, and then I never read it again. So I'd like to read it with you guys now as an atheist, and let's go ahead and get started. Since this is the first video in the new series, we don't have any comments to refer to, so I thought maybe we could just check out some of the Amazon reviews. This is a 3 out of 5 stars. This comes from Dolly with 3 out of 5 stars. I ordered this book on the strength of a recommendation by a reviewer who was evidently underwhelmed by its contents, and I think I was keen to expose its allegedly poor logic. If I had trouble to look at the date of the publication, I may have thought twice at showing its age. It's published in 2001, by the way. However, I don't regret it because although many of the issues against evolution and in favor of creation that this book raises have been regurgitated by creationists and ID proponents many times in the intervening years, it is on the button for its time and a handy reference for the ducking and diving and even imaginative frauds evolutionists have engaged in to try to make facts and theory harmonize. Just that already bothers me because the theory comes from the facts. The book also highlights some of the social consequences of a purely materialistic worldview. The book is fine up until the epilogue, where it takes on a more religious tone and outlines what Christians must now do, having been supplied with all this anti-evolution ammunition. I personally found this unnecessary, simply because anyone who takes the serious step of baptism as a Christian knows what he or she is signing up to, and promoting biblical creation would inevitably be involved in that. In parentheses, I am not a creationist, by the way. Interesting. So this book, with its rather clumsy title, the significance of which becomes apparent as one reads it through, is now a little out of date, but it is a pleasant read and pretty informative, but its audience is young earth Christians who the author feels need help with promoting their creationist beliefs. I think that might be a good summary of what I remember of the book, which is not very much, but I was never a young earth creationist. From Hemingway, we get 1 star out of 5. What a disaster. A very poor attempt to counteract claims by scientists and their contemporary theories dealing with evolution. I really wanted to bin it about halfway through, but kept going to the bitter end. Oh, this sounds right up our alley. I actually found myself on occasion screaming at the pages of the book like an idiot at some of the skewed logic contained within. Well, this is what we're looking for. I would almost recommend you read this book just to experience the comical efforts the writer makes to battle against evidence. Almost. Well, worry not. I'm here to help you. Let's try to find one. Here's one that's 5 stars. Everyone should question what we know and how we know it. I totally agree. That's how we find out a lot of the stuff isn't the case. Every Christian needs this book. Hank has masterfully laid out using empirical science to show that evolution is impossible. The bottom line is simple. Darwin said that the archaeological record would bear him out, and it has not. There has never been a transitory species discovered because they do not exist. Creation has a creator, a designer, and his name is Jesus. this? Ooh, a must-read for college students. This book is a must-read for college students and all Christians. This book will prepare you to answer and explain our faith in our Creator to anyone challenging our faith in God. By the way, Luz F. I can't think of a time in college when I was ever challenged in my Christianity, ever. Let's see. I think this book does a good job exposing evolution as not a fact, but as it should remain a theory. Ugh, thank you, name. Hank does a nice job making complex topics easy to understand. Okay, but then why are you giving 4 out of 5 stars? What is this? Anyway. Well, just like with the other book, we're going to start with all the pre-chapter 1 stuff first, and if that's not long enough, that's okay. We'll figure it out. Hank Hanegraaff has earned a reputation as a superlative Bible teacher and as a vibrant radio presence to whom many thousands of listeners turn when they need answers to hard questions. Well, that answers our question then. Is he a host? Seems like it. The subject of evolution needs as much a good teaching as it can get. As one who has plowed that bit of a field myself, I'm delighted to see Hank bringing his very special skills to the task of showing Christians what is at stake in the evolution controversy and telling them why they can't afford to ignore it. So just again, I became atheist without believing in evolution. That's not what's, I was going to ask, do they not realize? No, they don't realize, because I was taught the same thing in church, that it's this idea that if evolution wins the hearts of the people, they will go away from God. And that's just not the case. There are plenty of Christians who accept evolution, and you don't have to be atheist because of evolution in the sense of, oh, I see that evolution is a thing, therefore I'm atheist. They make it seem like there's this big fight for our souls and the only options are creationism or evolution, that if one of them wins, the other one can't. And that's where I think the problem sort of comes in. Not only are there Christians who believe in evolution, but evolution doesn't really have anything to do with atheism. If you want to be atheist and believe that we were made and handcrafted by aliens, go for it. There's nothing stopping you. Evolution doesn't make atheists. It just makes evolution. It helps us understand things like why some bacteria become resistant to antibiotics. That's about it. You know, why do some things look different on some islands compared to others? That's kind of there. That's it. Starting us off with some ideas about genetics. You know, how come I inherited this from one parent but didn't inherit something from another parent? This kind of helps us out a little bit, you know. But in terms of atheism, no. So there's no what is at stake in the evolution controversy. And I think it's only a certain subset of Christians that even see it as a controversy. Something very strange happened to our society in the 20th century. Oh boy, what do we got? It wasn't just that the details of the Genesis account had to be reinterpreted to take on the account of scientific findings. No, the Darwinian revolution went much farther than that. The fundamental biblical understanding of reality, which tells us that an all-powerful and loving God created men and women for a purpose, lost ground first in the universities and then in the culture at large. You know what? Why don't you just pause this and tell me, what is your purpose? What have you created out of your life now that you are not tied to a God, now that you're not tied to religion? What's something that you've created for yourself as your purpose? The purpose that we have in Christianity is simply to die. It's just a death cult. It's not anything special beyond being a death cult. And then, according to the Book of Enoch, our afterlife is just us worshiping God forever. What's the point of us being alive? Why would an all-powerful God require worship? That's so bizarre. He requires it so much that our souls will just worship him forever and ever and ever and ever. What kind of life is that? That's servitude. That's butt kissing. You know what I mean? What is that? That's not any purpose that I'm interested in. The spiritual cause of this decline was a perennial wish of fallen men to refuse to honor their true creator and to substitute idols or natural forces for the glory of the immortal God. You know, this really sounds like the other book so far. This idea that people were seeking something other than God, that they desperately were trying to replace God. And I think, again, that's where the problem sort of comes in. I never sought to replace God. It just kind of happened that I fell away from God. There was nothing to replace it. There was a comment I received years ago where somebody was upset with me because I'm trying to remove people's faith, but I'm not replacing it with anything, and therefore I'm doing a net damage. That I need to replace it with something. I don't know if this person was Christian, Muslim, atheist. I have no idea. It was a bit vague. But just this idea that you have to replace faith with something, what do you have to replace it with? You can just be mistaken, right? What do you need to replace? Every so often I'll think of that comment. What are we supposed to replace, and why do they think we have to replace it? When we stop believing in Santa Claus, we don't replace it with a belief in some other magical person that comes to bring us gifts on Christmas. We just accept that that wasn't the case and we were fooled. So this is a bit surprising here. And so this is just sort of in that same vein that faith is so valuable and it's such a virtue that if you're going to take it away, you have to replace it with something. And if you want to get rid of it, you have to find something to replace it with first. Then you can jump onto this new ship and abandon Christianity. This we know from Romans 1:20. We're already there. That everybody knows God, right? Romans 1:20-23. And the inevitable moral decline that stems from foolish substitution is described in the verses that follow. If humans are really just animals living by chance in an amoral universe, what else would you expect? Why do we have to have an inevitable moral decline if we're amoral, first of all? Second of all, if we define what is morality, it just helps us work together as social animals. The idea that we can feel empathy helps us function socially, which is why there's, experiments on rats, for example, that show that they exhibit something that we would definitely consider empathy or morality, helping somebody else before indulging in these chocolates and sharing the chocolates instead of just eating them by ourselves and then freeing our rat companion. The rats would actually free the rat companion and then share in the chocolates. And so this is definitely something that we would consider morally right, equal, fair, helpful, good, and it's rats. So is there a rat Jesus? Probably not. So if we are just animals living by chance in an amoral universe, well, there's different kinds of animals. There are animals that are very selfish because they tend to stand alone, and then there's social animals like us that rely on other people. Because we rely on other people, we have to be moral. That's basically it. Notice it's an amoral universe, not an immoral universe, so why would we have an inevitable moral decline? And then if it's an amoral universe, then how do we start with peak morality and then it can decline? See, this sounds really fancy to you if you're a Christian. It kind of helps you feel like, yeah, Romans 1:20 is true. But again, if you just consider what's being said, it doesn't actually make sense. The Darwinian theory of evolution made it appear that science had validated itself. After the triumph of Darwinism, it seemed absurd by most intellectuals to suppose anything else. The term agnostic was invented by Darwin's first disciple, Thomas Huxley, to describe the indifference towards the idea of God that Darwinism fostered. Agnosticism supposes that we can have no knowledge of God, and hence we can safely ignore the whole subject. Well, until that's proven otherwise, right? The Darwinists did not, and generally do not, claim to be able to prove that God does not exist, but they do claim to be able to account for the entire history of life without allotting any role to a creator. I would say this is probably the closest we can get to agreeing on why atheism and evolution might be related. But again, you don't have to accept evolution to be an atheist. You don't first have to understand evolution and then atheism follows. So I still disagree with that concept. That is why the Darwinian theory is so important and so misleading. It tells us that a blind and purposeless material process is our true creator and that God is merely the product of a primitive human imagination. Just as a child ceases to believe in Santa Claus, perfect, when he grows old enough to know who really puts the presents into stockings, the student of evolution is expected to recognize that God is a fantasy when he learns that matter is all that there is and that matter had to do its own creating. Well, the way they phrase it is very disingenuous, but it's so important, so misleading. It tells us a blind and purposeless material process. Okay, but it doesn't start us with abiogenesis, right? So I think they're kind of confusing this with abiogenesis, that matter does its own creating. Anyway, most people who have read this far will understand that evolutionary naturalism is the false teaching of a persons who, professing to be wise, became fools. It is not enough to know that this doctrine is wrong, however. We must understand why such a shaky theory has so much power over the minds of highly educated persons, so that what is mainly philosophy is taught as fact, even in many Christian classrooms. they're giving it so much power over the minds. To them, it has so much. I mean, how many times during a week do you consider or otherwise think about evolution? Right? I don't. This isn't so much power over our mind. It's not like we worship this concept or we're constantly thinking about it. And every time a Christian opens their mouth, we're just thinking evolution, evolution, evolution. In fact, when Christians say a lot of stuff about creationism, my response isn't evolution. My response is, okay, well, how do you know that? I have a book is not enough of an answer for me. Too many Christian parents have unwisely tried to protect their children from learning about evolution. Many of these parents have lost the battle when their children went off to college or even high school, where they were defenseless against an apparently irresistible philosophical system falsely presented in the name of science. What we need to do is not to shelter our young people, but to inoculate them by teaching them a great deal more about evolution than the mainstream science educators want them to know. I will agree with this, for sure. I think that exposing your kids to the counter argument is a great way to prepare them for it. The problem is when those kids take it seriously and take winning souls for Jesus seriously, like I did. For me, I wanted to always have some answer for whatever atheist would throw at me. So I had to really investigate what they were saying, and that left me with a lot of questions, you know. So part of that was me turning to my Bible, and that also left me with a lot of questions. Hank Hanegraaff doesn't advise parents and teachers to hide from false teaching. He gives them memorable teaching devices to help them identify the fallacies and to help them teach young people to not be misled. He exposes the specific wrong answers and provides lots of references to other literature. He teaches Christians to avoid the bad arguments by which they sometimes discredit themselves and warns them to avoid some of the unreliable information that's been widely circulated by well-meaning Christians who don't have their facts right. I mean, we can all agree on that at least. Finally, he encourages us to stay with the big picture and not go off on matters of detail that divide the faithful and give ammunition to the agnostics. That's interesting to phrase it that way. Focus on the big picture. When somebody brings up details, that's where the devil is, right? The devil's in the details, you guys. It's going to give ammunition to the agnostics. Don't get sidetracked by discussing details. So they want to give information, more information than the average science classroom does, the average biology classroom teaching about evolution in that unit. They want to give more information to the reader, to the children, comma, but no details. Don't get sidetracked with details. Well, Philip E. Johnson, you are not setting us up with a lot of confidence so far. Also, this idea about memorable teaching devices, I don't remember anything from this book beyond, I think they talk about Piltdown Man, and that's about it. That's pretty much it. I know that the face that demonstrates the farce of evolution is supposed to be like Nebraska Man or something. That's it. Honestly, I remember Jack Chick's Big Daddy much more than I remember this. And I was really excited to read this as a Christian. So Hank has done his many admirers a great service by providing this very helpful book. I hope that those who read it and learn from it will help us create a new generation of educated Christians who stand up for good science, but who also know how to expose the bad thinking and hidden philosophical assumptions so pervasive in evolutionary theory. Again, this book was written 24 years ago. Do you think it was effective? Please feel free to leave your comments now. Acknowledgements, don't care. King David says the heavens declare the glory, don't care. This is the face that's supposed to demonstrate the farce of evolution. I mean, I've seen this face so much with Hank's name. I don't actually know what Hank Hanegraaff looks like. So for me, when I think of Hanegraaff, I think of this. So the face that exposes Hank Hanegraaff. There it is. Because F-A-C-E. It was supposed to, okay. We're getting closer. We're remembering stuff. All right, before you begin, I'll never forget the day I first saw the face that demonstrates the farce of evolution. It virtually leapt off the page of my textbook. It had a sharply receding forehead that cascaded abruptly into a heavy brow ridge. Its mouth jutted open, revealing ape-like teeth. Its eyes were deep-set and pensive. They were the eyes of a philosopher, with a slightly worried look, as though he'd just seen his tax accountant. Ha 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 ha. What is this footnote? I have adapted this humorous way of describing Pithecanthropus erectus from Phil Saint, Fossils That Speak Out. Greensboro, North Carolina, Saint Ministries International, 1985. I like that our first footnote is Hank patting himself on the back for being so funny. Oh boy. Hilarious, guys. He's just seen his tax account. Get it? Because he's not even human. He doesn't have to pay taxes. This is pre-civilization. Hilarious. Oh my goodness, he's so funny. We're in for a real treat, you guys. Can we just see what Pithecanthropus looks like? Okay, so this is what we have. This is also like the Java man. There he is. Okay, I don't know. Does he look like he's just seen his tax accountant? What about this face? What do you think? This looks like he's talking to somebody, you know? Hey, buddy, you drank a lot last night. You doing all right? You said some weird stuff yesterday. The Hanegraaff one, that one. All right. I mean, I don't think they did a serious disservice to what appears to be the original, so that's good. Its eyes were deep-set and pensive. They were the eyes of a philosopher with a slightly worried look, as though he'd just seen his tax accountant. Humorous. If ever a picture was worth 1,000 words, this was it. Even at a tender age, I understood exactly what that picture meant. The message was crystal clear. This monkey was a man in the making. My earliest ancestor was not Adam, but an ape. Well, we are apes. The Bible was based on fiction. In the beginning, God created was simply the start of an infamous fairy tale. So for me, one thing I was interested in about evolution was that I felt like the biblical creation process followed along with the evolutionary process, that we started off in the water, then things on the land, things in the air, and then humans. And so I didn't see, even as a Christian, I didn't see evolution as this, oh, it's going to destroy my faith. I didn't learn very much about it, but what I did learn didn't bother me at all. So it was a bit odd to see this as such a big deal that we weren't supposed to learn about. I never questioned it with my faith, ever. What about for you guys? If you left your Abrahamic religion, was this related at all? Or was this something that you never learned about until after you left? Was it something that you learned a bit about and you thought, I don't see what the big deal is, I can still be a creationist? Almost 20 years passed before I realized I'd been duped. The face that stared back at me from the pages of my textbooks was a farce. Pithecanthropus erectus, the ape man who walked erect, not Genesis, was a figment of a fertile imagination. I hope that this second footnote is going to tell us how he realized that he's been duped. Those who once placed their faith in Pithecanthropus erectus have had to move on to newer ape men fantasies. Pithecanthropus erectus itself has evolved into the newer classification Homo erectus. So because science updates as it learns more, that's bad. But I mean, that's what Christians will tell you. From evolution to evidence. I began life's journey in the security of a Christian home, the product of a godly heritage. Just say I grew up Christian. You know what I'm saying? We're in for a treat. Each mealtime, my father read scripture, and each week I attended an Orthodox church. My parents and my pastors taught me about a God who loves me with an everlasting love, about a God who is also righteous and just, whose eyes are too pure to look on evil, and who cannot tolerate wrong. They made it clear that only through the person and work of Jesus Christ would my life have true meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. Yes, what is that meaning? What is that purpose? And what is that fulfillment? I wish he would have included that, because that's the big issue, right? That they're upset that atheists have a purposeless existence. Meanwhile, their existence has no purpose. And I mentioned this in that other book as well, so forgive me for repeating myself, but for those who didn't watch it, the purpose of my life was something I never understood as a Christian. If God knows everything, he knows if I'm going to go to heaven, he knows if I'm going to go to hell, and he knows that living on earth is suffering. Why do we have to live on earth at all? Why not just create us and put us where we're destined to be? You know that I'm going to choose the devil, so just create me in hell, create me in heaven, which made me wonder, well then, if he has a choice in how he creates us, why doesn't he just create everybody in heaven and we can just hang out with him? What is the purpose of this? In church I was taught that our human life is a blip in the eye of eternity, so we shouldn't be distracted by the world and by the devil because this is such a short time. It feels like a long time because, well, it's the only thing we know right now, but as long as you stay on the path, you will be rewarded in heaven. So don't go get sidetracked now. Stay focused. Why? I mean, if this is just a blip in the eye of eternity, well, what's the point? You already know what we're going to choose. Just make us there. But that, again, went to, well, why make us in hell at all? And then it sort of became, well, what is our purpose anyway? Why does God need to create us in the first place? They say because he loves us, but if he loves us, then he would create us to just be hanging out with him in heaven. Why would we go through this? So I never found my purpose as a Christian living my life. My life was, I thought my purpose was done. I've pledged my life to Jesus. I was ready to be a martyr, and quite frankly, that was one of the reasons that I joined the military during a time of war. Suicide would send me straight to hell, but if I died doing something, well, that's not suicide. I mean, it's a death cult. That's all it is. But there was a catch. To experience true peace, I had to be willing to submit my life to Christ rather than travel the road of life guided by the dictates of my own will. Exactly as I said. And this I was not willing to do. Interesting. So he was trained up in the way that he should go, and when he's old he will not depart from it, and he's telling us he departed from it. Interesting. I did not want to be deprived of all the pleasures the world had to offer, so I chose rebellion instead of repentance. It was not hard for me to justify my decision. At the same time that I was reading scripture in church, I was reading science in class. That was it. And it was in science that I thought I had discovered an avenue to escape from accountability. Okay, Hank, if you really believe this, how dumb are you? How dumb are you? You think that you can escape accountability so you can just do whatever you want? We're accountable to other people. What do we mean escape from accountability? We're accountable to other people. We're accountable to the law. You can't just do whatever you want, Hank. That's so ridiculous. And then again, there's this idea that atheists want to live life on their own terms and escape from accountability. That never was the case for me. There was never this idea that, oh, this is too oppressive. Oh, I wish I could just do whatever. It was just, oh, I can't justify believing in a spirit world. Huh. Well, I guess I shouldn't believe it if I can't justify it then. I guess I'm an agnostic now. That was it. It had nothing to do with accountability. The prevailing scientific sentiment was that the world had come into existence from purely natural and random processes. Humans arose from the primordial slime. Atoms evolved into amoebas, invertebrates became vertebrates, and monkeys evolved into humans. Gee, Hank, you were not paying attention in science class, Hank. You were not paying attention. Enlightened teachers were quick to point out that the science had proved the Bible to be the stuff of legends and God to be little more than a cosmic killjoy. What church were you what school was this? Hank, come on. So what is Hank's argument here? Because he failed to understand biology, because he failed to understand sociology, because he failed to just be a basic good human being and productive person in society, because he just didn't want to do any of that, therefore evolution isn't true? Is that where we're going with this? That's what it seems like. With the creator out of the picture, I was free to grab for all the gusto life had to offer. And so, until age 29, I followed the dictates of my own will, searching for happiness as I moved from one happening to the next. Despite temporary successes, I was left with a nagging emptiness that never seemed to go away. Well, yeah, so you're telling me randomly following trends isn't the path to deep and purposeful life? Really? You're telling me that bouncing from whim to whim as it happens is not a way to create some kind of foundational sense of self and sense of purpose? Golly, Maslow's hierarchy of needs could have helped you out there. Oh, but you were too busy understanding science where monkeys evolved into people. Yeah, okay. One wet and windy evening in January 1979, however, 3 Christians paid me a visit. What is this, like the ghosts of Christmas past? They reminded me that God loved me and had a transcendent purpose for my life. Right, worship. Worship is the purpose. They claimed Jesus Christ could replace my emptiness with peace, and the Bible was a roadmap that would guide me through the maze of life. They were so kind and thoughtful that I felt a tinge of guilt for corresponding to their compassion with sarcasm and condescension. So again, don't be a dick, be a dude, number 1, right? And number 2, you're empty and they preyed on you. And because you clearly can't think for yourself, you can't think straight, you got no understanding at basic science, logic, or social interaction, you fell for it hook, line, and sinker. This is really telling us all we need to know about Hank Hanegraaff, isn't it? I don't think he realized how much he was divulging of himself. I could not resist the urge to point out that science had long ago demonstrated that God was little more than an illusion, that the Bible was a book for narrow-minded obscurantists, and that the humans and their religious notions were merely functions of evolutionary process. I would love for Hank to explain evolutionary psychology as it pertains to religion. I would love to hear Hank try to explain that. My guest listened politely until I paused to catch my breath. Okay, so you're just gish galloping. You are not... Hank is not presenting himself, and I know that's the point, he's presenting himself as that big jerk of an atheist, but he's not presenting a realistic atheist, I would say. He seems like it's not so much that he was atheist or that he was not I don't even know what it is at this point. I guess atheist, I guess. He's not really telling us that he was atheist. He's telling us that he was an idiot and a jerk who somehow, through his idiocy and jerktitude, managed to not find the meaning of life at age page 29. Therefore God. Okay. Then one of them asked if I was open-minded enough to objectively consider the evidence on both sides of the origins debate so I can make an informed decision. Then they told me that the following week their church would be hosting a workshop in which evolution would be examined in the light of empirical laws of science. With that, they left. I'm glad they left. It sounds like Hank was very difficult to deal with. That next week, I was irresistibly drawn to a day of destiny, a day that would change my life for time and for eternity. As the day progressed, the foundation of evolution began to crumble and the shaky pillars on which I had built my worldview collapsed. You know what? I'm going to agree that your worldview was built on very shaky pillars, and this foundation of evolution, Hank, you thought evolutionary theory said that monkeys evolved into humans. What foundation of evolution did you even have? You thought that evolution was your teachers telling you there is no God, science has determined there is no God, therefore there's no such thing as accountability. You're not a very intelligent guy, Hank. Your foundation of evolution was nonsense, if that's what it was. I mean, I'm not making it up here, that's what he told us. More than that, my smug stereotyping of Christians as Bible thumpers who had checked their brains at the narthex of a church fell apart. I'm glad that he's including these extracurricular SAT words. This is how we know that he's super duper smart. He could have just said, check their brains at the door, drop their brains at the porch. But no, he's letting us know. He's a really smart guy, you guys. He knows a lot of words, and that evolution says monkeys evolved into people from primordial slime, no less. It comes across as when students don't really know what they're saying, so they run it through Grammarly, they ask ChatGPT to help boost the language to sound more academic, and then they turn it in, and it sounds academic, but when you read it, it's really shallow, nonsensical, doesn't answer the questions that are being posed, and you have to say, you know, it looks nice, but I'm looking for content more than form. I came face to face, are you sure it wasn't face to farce? With the realization that I had not rejected the creation model because the evidence for evolution was so overwhelming, but because I did not want to yield my life to the will of the creator. Well, okay. Hank. I'm gonna say, yeah, you should have gone back to church then, because that's stupid. I think if you're the type of person who doesn't want to yield your life to the will of the creator, as Hank writes here, stay in church. You should be atheist because you are not satisfied with the answers that came from your religious text. The idea that you're atheist while still believing in a creator, number one, you're not atheist. He's trying to claim that he was because, oh, I just threw away God, right? So that seems like he's atheist, but really he believes in a creator that he's actively rebelling against. He even phrases it that way earlier in the writing, that he wanted to do an act of rebellion. So he's rebelling against a God that he believes exists. What kind of sense does that make? Because if you believe in that God and you believe in hell, why would you do everything you can to put yourself there? That's ridiculous. The reason that Christians, Muslims telling us about going to hell or Jahannam, they tell us this as if it's supposed to scare us, and it doesn't scare us because we don't believe in it. That's the difference between whatever Hank was doing and me, and most of you watching this too. If you're gonna just not yield your life to the will of a creator, that's weird. I know, that's weird, right? Yeah. Not long after I examined the evidence, the creator of the cosmos became the Lord and Savior of my life. Now, 2 decades later, he is more real to me than the very flesh upon my bones. That is frightening. That is frightening. That's Hank saying everything that I know to be true. I know, it's very upsetting, isn't it, Crook? Everything that Hank knows to be true pales in comparison to his faith, which is exactly what this death cult wants, but that is very scary, that he doesn't even trust his own flesh and bone that he can see and touch and get scanned. He trusts that less than God. So hopefully we're going to get a lot of really good evidence in here, right? Today my passion is to demonstrate that evolution is, as Dr. Louis Benoit, director of research at the French National Center for Scientific Research, put it, a fairy tale for grown-ups. Ooh, we get another footnote. Director of research, blah, 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 as quoted by Paul S. Taylor, The Illustrated Origins Answer Book, 4th edition, Mesa, Arizona. Okay, so wait, as quoted in Advocate, as quoted in Paul S. Taylor. So we're not quoting Louis Benoit. I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm sorry. We're not quoting Louis Burner, okay? We're quoting something twice removed. Can we see what he actually said? Because that's pretty weird. That's pretty weird. I feel like we talked about this already in the other book, but let's just go over it again because I'm reminded of it. I don't remember it totally. All right. Concerning the quotation with which this section began, let's repeat it here. Evolutionism is a fairy tale for grown-ups. This theory has helped nothing in the progress of science. It is useless. Professor Louis Berner, former president of the Biological Society of Strasbourg and director of the Strasbourg Zoological Museum, later director of research at the French National Center of Scientific Research, as quoted in The Advocate, Thursday, 8 March 1984. Since the revised quote book stated that Professor Benoit had served as a director of research at the French National Center of Scientific Research, I wrote to that center. I asked them the exact origin of the quotation, and I received the following reply dated March 3rd, 1995, translated, Dear Mr. Babinski, the new director of the CNRS, Mr. Guy Albert, has given me your letter, which requested several points of information. Here's the information I could gather. The beginning of the quotation, evolution is a fairy tale for adults, is not from Benoit, but from Jean Rostad, a much more famous French biologist, also member of the Academy of Sciences in the French Academy. The precise quotation is as follows. Transformationism is a fairy tale for adults. But Rostand also wrote that transformism may be considered as accepted, and no scientist, no philosopher no longer discusses the fact of evolution. Jean Rostand was an atheist. So it seems like a fairy tale for adults, but it's something we just have to accept. So it might be if Einstein mocked quantum entanglement as spooky action from a distance, but as far as we can tell, it is what happens, so we have no choice but to accept it. The end of the quotation of Professor Benoit, to which you allude, is taken from his book, Determinism and Finality. The precise quotation is the following, that by this, evolutionism would appear as a theory without value is confirmed also pragmatically. A theory must not be required to be true, more or less. It must be required to be usable. Indeed, none of the progress made in biology depends even slightly on a theory, the principles of which are nevertheless filling every year volumes of books, periodicals, and congresses with their discussions and their disagreements. So this is basically just saying, cool, what can we do with it? And yeah, I agree. This is one of those things that I tell my AP psychology students, that we have this question of free will. And is it the case? Based off of what we understand in the brain, we're not really able to justify this other concept of free will. You know, how do we define free will? And then do we have it? A lot of what we do, a lot of our output, our behaviors, our thoughts, our output is made up of our input, which is our genetics and our upbringing. If we're witnessing a traumatic event, one person can develop PTSD and one person doesn't. Why? It's not a choice to develop PTSD. Somebody just does. It's not a choice to react a certain way. You just do. And then how much of that is a choice? Well, I have an instinct or an impulse to behave a certain way, but I choose not to. Well, how much of that is due to your upbringing, your position in life, that you want to punch somebody in the face, but you don't because you know that you would get fired from your job and you can't afford to be fired from your job, for example. How much of that do we actually control? And the students always kind of freak out a little bit. I forget which chapter. It's like early on. It's like chapter 4 or something. And I say, you know what? Don't worry about it. This is one of those things that might keep you awake a couple times, but ultimately, whether we have free will or not, we believe we do, and we're just gonna wake up and go back to school the next day. We're gonna choose what we want to eat for lunch, and whether that's predetermined based on my genetic basis and my life situation, or whether that is something that I'm actually choosing because I personally like it, for whatever that means, that's still what I'm going to choose to eat for lunch the next day. So, do we have free will? Does it matter? Not really. So that's one of the things, like, yeah, don't worry about it too much, you know, get into it if it's something that you want to study. Sure. If you don't want to do research on it, sure. But beyond that, don't think too deeply about it. Don't worry about it. It's not anything that's going to affect your day-to-day life. And so that's what it seems like it's being said here. All right. As far as we know, Louis Benoit never served as director, nor was even a member of the CNRS. He was a professor of biology at the University of Strasbourg. Benoit was a Christian, but did not affirm that Genesis was to be taken to the letter. He expressed his ideas in his work. He is clearly a finalist and against all contingent visions of evolution. Finalism is a philosophical term related to a belief in ultimate purpose or design behind everything, including, in this case, the evolution of the cosmos of life. He bases his views, among other things, on the existence of elements that are pre-adapted for future functions. Okay. So it just seems like this is a lie, which is why it's, as quoted by Paul S. Taylor from The Advocate, from Louis Benoit, or Louis Benoit. So there's a reason he didn't go to the original source. It doesn't exist. But that's okay, right? Because Hank Hanegraaff has shown us that this is his level of research and depth of understanding. That when something interesting like a director of research for science, it's not specified specifically that, oh, it's for biology, a scientific director of research says something that sounds anti-science or against what the current scientific understanding is, for him, he just thinks, wow. He doesn't think, I should probably check to see if that's true, and I should probably check to see if this was taken out of context. More than that, it is my desire to equip committed Christians to use the fallacies of evolution as an opportunity to revolutionize the lives of multitudes for time and for eternity. I mean, cool. Again, you could just say, I want Christians to know how to argue against evolution. But no, he wants to inspire for eternity. Do you think that Hank realized how much of himself he was giving away when he wrote this? Especially the part where he says that it's humorous. Interesting. Whilst on board the Beagle, I was quite orthodox, and I remember being heartily laughed at by several of the officers, though they themselves orthodox, for quoting the Bible as an unanswerable authority on some point of morality. Charles Darwin. When it was first said that the sun stood still and the world turned round, the common sense of mankind declared the doctrine false, but the old saying of voice of the people, voice of God, as every philosopher knows, cannot be trusted in science. Okay, can you guys understand why he included these quotes? No idea. Her Majesty's ship, the Beagle. Okay, so what? So what? Who cares? Okay, so what? And it's small enough, why not put it on the same page? Was there like a page minimum that he was trying to reach? All right, charting the course. Let me check if this is charting the course. Let me check. Is this still part of our preamble? Okay. On December 27th, charting the course. On December 27, 1831, Charles Darwin left Devonport, England, aboard Her Majesty's ship, the Beagle. Long before the departure date, however, Captain Robert Fitzroy began charting the course. As Darwin set sail, he was a Bible-believing creationist. In his words, I did not then, in the least, doubt the strict and literal truth of every word in the Bible. Okay, here we got another footnote. All right. The notion that Darwin was ever a Bible-believing creationist is widely disputed. In fact, his grandfather Erasmus, the real inventor of the theory of evolution, was an 18th century rationalist. Wait, so they're saying letters of Darwin himself can't be trusted, that he believed the Bible, and it seems like other people around him didn't believe the Bible. But this quote from a French guy that I didn't even check because I didn't even read his book, because I don't even know if it's the right guy, that's quoted 2 degrees of separation from him, that's true. Okay, well, I hope you guys like cherries, because we're picking. However, as Dr. Michael Denton points out, for Darwin, the Beagle proved to be the turning point of his life, a liberating journey through time and space which freed him from the constraining influence of Genesis. Every voyage conjures up a vision of new horizons and emancipation, but there is something particularly evocative about the voyage on the Beagle to the remote and little-known shores of South America. Well, it was probably known to the people that lived there. It is almost as if the elemental forces of nature, so apparent along those cold and stormy coasts of Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, had conspired together to fragment the whole framework of biblical literalism in Darwin's mind, to blow his intellect clear of all the accumulated cobwebs of tradition and religious obscurantism. The Beagle is also symbolic of a much greater voyage, which the whole of our culture subsequently made from the narrow fundamentalism of the Victorian era to the skepticism and uncertainty of the 20th century. Darwin's experiences during those liberating 5 years became the experience of the world. Okay, great. Denton 25. Denton 25. Does he know that that's not a citing a source? I get it's written by Denton. I get it's on page 25, but we're missing the source. Okay. Oh, Hank. I feel stupid. This was so convincing to me back in the day. Oh my goodness. Denton goes on to demonstrate that what Darwin saw as the liberating worldview of evolution has in reality led civilization into a monstrous lie. Darwin's journey on the Beagle sowed seeds of doubt in his mind regarding creationism. As you continue through the pages of this book, you will discover that his doubts were totally unwarranted. Alright guys, get ready. When Darwin charted his course, didn't Captain Robert Fitzroy chart the course? Okay. Okay. When Darwin charted his course, he did not know where the pages of the journey would lead. In contrast, as you travel through these pages, I want you to know exactly where you're going and how you will get there. Oh, good. Great. You're just leading us by the nose. Fantastic. If you begin as a creationist, you will become equipped to demonstrate the farce of evolution. In addition, your confidence in the Christian worldview will be solidified. If you begin as an evolutionist, the shaky pillars of your worldview will be undermined. That is one thing I keep remembering, is that he kept referring to this as shaky pillars of your worldview, shaky foundation, shaky this, shaky that. Does he have some kind of marketing for it? I don't know. Truth or consequences. We begin our journey with a chapter titled Truth or Consequences. As you progress through this section, you will discover that more consequences for society hinge on the issue of human origins more than any other. Among them are the sovereignty of self, the sexual revolution, and survival of the fittest. Oh boy. Get ready. To make the heart of this material memorable, I developed chapters 2 through 5 around the acronym FACE. For generations, the face of Pithecanthropus erectus has been used to covertly communicate the notion that evolution is based in fact. Now I will use it to overtly demonstrate that evolution is a farce. Fossil follies. The F in face will serve to remind us that the fossil record is an embarrassment to evolutionists. It demonstrates in spades that the transitional forms from one species to another are purely mythological. Does he know that everything's a transitional form? Does he realize that? Like, we're not finding a crocodile. Does he know that? I don't think he knows that. While the general public seems blithely unaware of the fact that transitions from one species to another do not exist, it is common knowledge among paleontologists. That is precisely why novel theories involving pseudosaurs, proaviuses, sorry guys, and punctuated equilibrium are constantly evolving. Okay, ape men, fiction, fraud, and fantasy. A represents ape men, fiction, fraud, and fantasy. I don't like that. Just how about ape men fiction, ape men fantasy, ape men fraud? I don't know. It's long for A, and it's not a bunch of A. Fossil follies, fine. As you proceed, you will discover that the Pithecanthropus erectus is fictitious. Piltdown man was a fraud. That's what I remember. Yep. Peking man was pure fantasy. To say that hominids like Peking man and his partners are closely related to humans because both can walk is like saying a hummingbird and a helicopter are closely related because both can fly. The distance between an ape who cannot read or write and a descendant of Adam who can compose a musical masterpiece or send someone to the moon is a distance of infinity. Well, how about whatever this is that you're producing, Hank? How far removed are you from any of these? I would say you're probably close to Piltdown Man because so far your brain is fictional. Chance. C stands for chance. Imagine having the temerity to suggest that Christopher Wren had nothing to do with the design of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Imagine asserting that the majestic Messiah composed itself apart from Handel. Or imagine that the Last Supper painted itself without Leonardo da Vinci. In chapter 4, we will consider some of the even more egregious notions that an eye, an egg, or the earth, each in its vast complexity, came into existence by blind chance. As we will see, forming even a protein molecule by random processes is not only improbable, but is also indeed impossible. Great, I hope he explains why it's impossible. I hope so. Because the guy that didn't understand evolution never said monkeys turn into humans, I don't trust his math. And also, what is this? The irreducible complexity argument? Wow, this isn't special. Empirical science. E represents empirical science. Go to the classics section of virtually any video store and you will find a propaganda piece titled Inherit the Wind. It features a fictionalized account of the 1925 Scopes trial in which creationists are portrayed as bigoted ignoramuses while evolutionists are pictured as benevolent intellectuals. Is that why you're using your thesaurus so much, Hank? Because you can't put lipstick on a pig, okay? In chapter 5, we will test the theory of evolution. How? In light of reason and empirical science rather than rhetoric and emotional stereotypes. As you will discover, the basic laws of science, including the laws of effects and their causes, energy conservation, and entropy, here we go, undergird the creation model for origins and undermine the evolutionary model. This one, recapitulation, what was it? Something, phylogeny recapitulates something. That was part of this book. Up to this point, we have used FACE as an acronym to equip you to remember the arguments for responding to the farce of evolution. In chapter 6, we will insert the letter R and change face to farce. Here, R is recapitulation. This letter will remind you of the recapitulation theory, commonly referred to by the evolutionary cliche, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. There it is. This notion, championed by men such as Carl Sagan, suggests that the course of an embryo's development, ontogeny, recapitulate into its evolutionary history of its species, or phylogeny. Thus, at various points in the emerging embryo is a fish, then a frog, and finally a fetus. This theory not only relies on revisionistic history, but has also been used as justification for Roe v. Wade and for racism. Yeah, well, the Bible's also been used for slavery, and why we should enslave Africans is from biblical dogma. So that's not, like, he puts racism in italics, like, oh, this is racist inherently. No, some people are douchebags and they act in douchebaggery, you know, that's it. Epilogue. It's not enough to demonstrate that evolution is a farce. In the epilogue, you'll be equipped to use your well-reasoned answers as opportunities for sharing the good news that God, who created us, also desires the reconciliation and fellowship with us. While you cannot change anyone's heart, only the Holy Spirit can do that, you can prepare yourself to sensitively and effectively communicate the difference between mere religion and a meaningful relationship with the Creator. So, again, disprove evolution all you like. I'm really not sure that's even going to happen, but let's go with it. But disprove evolution all you like, that still doesn't get us any closer to Christianity. Oh well. Oh, and we get this FACE. All right, and then recapitulation thrown in there. Oh, R is for revisionism, Roe v. Wade, and racism. Wow, wow. Like, does he not understand anything in history at all? Okay. Evolution is a general postulate to which all theories, all hypotheses, all systems must henceforward bow, and which they must satisfy in order to be thinkable and true. Evolution is a light which illuminates all facts, a trajectory which all lines of thought must follow. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it according to their various kinds. And it was so. And God said, Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move on the ground according to their kinds." The prophet Moses. Does Hank not know that Moses existing as an author is in dispute? I think he's trying to show that it is a dichotomy. You either believe that God did it or you believe that evolution did it. That's it. But I think the big problem here is that who cares what Pierre said? Who cares? My day-to-day life is not going to be affected by this guy, number one. Number two, I don't think any biologist doing research refers to, oh, well, remember, okay, whatever Pierre said, that was true. I don't think that Hank realizes he's, again, telling on himself that because I believe that individual people are prophets or some special guys that we should listen to, some special authority. Therefore, science also has special authorities like Mr. Deschardins. And that's not the case. So again, we've got Hank showing us he doesn't understand science. Oh, Hank. Oh, Hank. We get a picture of Darwin's study, site of an intellectual revolution. Who cares? Again, are you meeting a quota? What is this? All right, chapter 1, we'll deal with this later. No. So, you guys excited for our new book? This is gonna be really good. This is great. I'm worried that this might actually be worse than the Turek Geisler book. They at least spent some time with evolution and some time with design and then some time with the Bible, and then through their own poor reasoning, we at least see where their steps are. We see where, okay, well, if this part of the Bible, then this other part of the Bible, and if this second part of the Bible, then this third part of the Bible, and if this third part of the Bible, then the Bible is true, historic, and everything in it is true, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Which again, it's not good reasoning, but we could at least see the steps they took. But it seems like we're just saying, hey, evolution isn't true, and then epilogue, believe in Jesus. So, yeah, this might be worse. But then again, this is for, well, I was going to say it is for Christians, but Hank wrote, if you're an evolutionist, your shaky pillars are going to come crashing down. So he knows that anybody might be reading this. It's not just Christians. Oh boy. If you guys have anything to say so far, please, please, please write them down, because whatever you guys say is going to be infinitely more humorous, intellectual, and interesting than anything we've read thus far. And I'm going to make a prediction, anything we're going to read in this book. I'm going to say already, this just shows how limiting thought can be when you're stuck in religion. This idea that I'm just going to take this authority, I'm just going to accept it as it is. I didn't go flipping back and forth through the footnotes when I was a Christian. When Hank cited this special French guy, who's a special French scientist and a director of science, this guy said this thing about evolution, I was just like, wow. And I was left reading these portions of the book already kind of set up to think, oh, even the scientists know this is not true, but for some reason, probably the devil, they're telling us that it is true to maybe get us away from God. How terrible is this? That it's this open secret that nobody wants to talk about, but all the scientists know that evolution is false. I don't know why they're teaching it to us. And then now this quote that they give him, or that they give us, where Mr. Pierre says this thing about evolution and you gotta follow it, it's presented to us as if this is some authority in science, you know, and that science has authorities. I'm glad that I don't have to consider things through the lens of Christianity anymore, that I can just consider things. That when somebody says something, I can just check it out. And it doesn't scare me or hurt me to do that. There were even times when I've said, reading that previous book, yeah, I agree with this. There's been times already here where I said, yeah, I guess, you know, we can kind of agree on this too. So I'm not just objecting to everything he says just because he's Christian, but at the same time, I am willing to call out where he's making really obvious flawed reasoning, poor decisions, etc. when it presents itself. So I guess we'll see where this takes us. Anyway, appreciate that you guys have stuck around for this long. If you guys want to check out other stuff like the Discord, please check out the link in the details section below. And if you also want to become a cult member and help me with things like pain medication, caffeine, and migraine pills, then feel free to join the cult. You can do so on Patreon, or you can do so here on YouTube as a YouTube member. If you join the cult, then you get early access to the videos without ads, and then we have a live stream that we do for cult members only at the end of every month, and it's always a great time. We check out more stuff like this, and you know, anything that you guys want to see, more things that have to do with like ghosts, demons, cults, that kind of stuff, and just have a nice time. With that being said, guys, as always, thanks for listening.
Train up a child in the way they should go, and they shan't depart from it. Spare the rod, spoil the child's what we're told. They want to justify being hit. Children must obey their parents in all things. For this pleases the Lord. But is that all I can expect from my life? Comes in submission till I'm floored. What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong, and punish us from afar? And tell us we're broken, to tell us sure we're worthy as we are. Among his names, why is one of them jealous? What does that even mean? Why require our worship anyway? Why does he need anything? He is the potter and we are the clay. He does what he wills. If matters not, what could we even do? It's his choice to save or kill. Why create this fuss system? Where's all the alleged wisdom? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong, and punish us from afar? You tell us we're broken, to sell us sure we're worthy as we are. What if I'm a doubting Thomas? Why refuse to reach out to us? If we are to seek the Lord, Why does he hide of his own accord? Why give us brains to reason, but using them is highest